way, if you remember, Chris, there's a very good reason why you should remember that clock is fast. You remember, Matthew? It was yeah, okay. Anyway, let's get going. So thanks all for coming. We've got welcome to Jonathan and welcome to Ray. Ray is in place of Gary. Sorry, Martin is in place of Gary. I've been informed. Matthew's regular meter, Darryl, Chris, regular member. And okay, Jonathan's Jonathan's on the committee, and Julie has been invited because she's I don't know why. Why are you invited, Julie? All right, okay. Welcome to everyone. The minutes, page 5 to 10, to confirm a true record. Those that were here. Interestingly, I wasn't here, so I will defer to somebody who accept or not the minutes. So we have a proposal and a seconder for that. Those are in favour that we accept the minutes, please show. That's not quite unanimous, but those in favour, we had 3. Jonathan wasn't here. That's sufficient. Thank you. Yeah. Declarations of interest. Have we got any declarations of interest? None. There being none, thank you. Public question time. Have we had any public questions? No public questions. None at all. Alex.
Not a public question, but from the previous minutes, there was an action that we would update Matthew on Folly Lane. It's a question that you asked. Joseph has been looking at it from legal, from an ownership point of view, and I think you knew this anyway. There isn't really any ownership, council-owned parts of that lane, but just wanted to confirm that. We've had a discussion with the planners about whether there's any planning gain money from the Folly in planning application and also the Folly Works application. There is some minor changes, but they are very minor, and some of them are to the rights of way, the greenway in front of the road there. I think the third question I think you asked, Matthew, was has the local authority ever done any work on that road? Not in recent living memory. I have found something from about 35 years ago where they did some minor sort of goodwill works, potholes, etc., but nothing since. Thank you.
Chairman, is it okay for me to speak on that?
Of course, Matthew.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Alex. What I would say is the residents committee that I've been working with down there said that the Isle of Wight Council have worked with them in recent times, probably in the last 10 years, and did actually help with some repairs to the road. It was kind of like a 4-pronged attack on just resolving the worst bits. And I think really, I guess what I was really sort of asking is, as and when something desperately needs doing, there's various routes that we would look to first, but it was just to make sure there's a bit of open dialogue if we need to come to the council to see, as I consider the council to be a stakeholder because of the Folly and the harbour function at the Folly. And obviously the users of the harbour function at the Folly would use Folly Lane, but obviously there's the potential with the future development that there'll be a new road anyway that will lead down to there. So it may never happen, but it's just that's why I brought it up in the first place. So thank you.
Thanks, Matthew. You made a point well made, and I think we understand and accept the necessity that the road is functioning. It's like most things across our council, it's finding the money to intervene in the smallest of things. Sorry, do you want to speak to that, Alex?
I can talk to this one if you can do that. You've got the figures in front of you. These are the financial reports as of the end of June. It's a standard item on the agenda for this committee. a similar pattern to what we've been experiencing since the beginning of the year. It's obviously still early part of the year yet. But I suppose in summary, in terms of Newport Harbour, the expenditure is still forecasted for an overspend at the end of the year of 32,000 or just over 32,000. That's mainly due to an increase in the contractor services budgets, and that's some of the legal work that we've had done on various different things in the harbour. However, the income is showing a surprising and very well warranted, I think, increase on the forecast, being forecasted for 38,000 up at the end of the year, meaning that the current prediction that we'll have from finance is that we'll be in a slight surplus by the end of the year, about 5,500. The income has been mainly due to the increase in leasing income with some of the leasing negotiations that we've been able to do, and some quite good, I suppose, figures for moorings. Jonathan may talk about this a little bit later. Some of the visitor moorings aren't quite as encouraging as we'd hoped, and there are some reasons for that. But generally, particularly, this period of time after COVID, I think some of those figures are quite encouraging and moving in the right direction. Generally quite pleased with that. Has anybody got any questions on Newport one?
Any questions, Ben? I know it's a financial aspect, but what sort of percentage occupancy have we got currently?
At the Folly, our pontoon car moorings, I believe we may have one that's available, but I've got two people arguing over it at the moment. And swing moorings, I think I've got 25, 30 of them left, but they're the very shallow ones that can only take up to about 4.5 5 metre boats, but they are filling up.
Are they all for day visitors, for day boats?
No, they're all permanent. So therefore, the swing moorings are either for a 7-month contract or for a 12-month contract. The pontoons are only available for a 12-month contract.
Yeah, that's a very valid point, though, Councillor Jordan makes it, and that John, and obviously the permanent moorings are doing very well, in effect are full, and some of the visitor moorings aren't doing quite as well. So there is a view of, do we allocate more of the visitor moorings to permanence, or do we assume that the situation might improve for visitors with changes at the Folly and any other changes that might go on down there? But we are having that debate on an operational level at the minute.
Further comments? You're happy for our officers to carry on looking at that? Seems sensible to me. We look at how we best utilise the spaces we've got. Thank you. And ditto then for Ventnor Harbour.
Ventnor Harbour, we've only got 5
This one, finance at the minute. You put the finance stuff you want first, Phil, and then you'll come. That's all right. Sorry. This one's quite relatively straightforward. I mean, it's a very simple budget. It's showing exactly the same pattern as it was showing last month. The biggest concern, obviously, is, as it was last month, is the increase in the cost of the seaweed clearance, which is forecasted at the end of the year to be about £23,000 over. We had a debate about that last time we were here. There has been some further discussions, although I think before we can really go public on that, we need to be a little bit more firmed up about other parties taking on the harbour, but they are in their infancy at this stage. But that problem continues. We haven't yet resolved it or found a solution to that, but that probably has been there since the day the harbour was built.
Questions, Julie?
Thank you for allowing me to ask a question, Chair. It was just basic, because I recall the meeting before last, we had that very interesting presentation, didn't we, on perhaps a different way of looking at the seaweed issue there. I was just wondering, what has been there been any movement on that proposal, or Like, because I think they're going to be putting in a EOI when it goes back out to tender again. Am I correct? So maybe if that's getting a bit contractual and a bit difficult, you don't have to answer. But just it was a very interesting presentation we had.
Yes, thank you. It was an interesting presentation. I mean, it didn't just cover the harbour, as you kind of alluded to. It covered the whole of the island, didn't it, in terms of various different pockets of seaweed issues that regeneration are leading on. I'm not too sure where they are with that generally, but overall, as I understand it, the conclusion they came to with Ventnor Harbour was that what we were doing was probably the best solution that they could come up with, which after all that work, just was a little bit disappointing from our point of view, because we've been looking for a solution to this for quite some time.
Alex, we can't go into much more detail, but negotiations are on about a different future for the harbour. At this stage, we don't really want to say too much more, but the ongoing costs may be something that's taken care of in some future arrangements for the harbour. Any further questions? Chris is anxious for his cup of tea and cake upstairs. Item 5, report the Senior Harbour Master. Jonathan.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we've had a fair bit sort of from April to, I'm afraid this only goes up to the 20th of June, but I managed to get the Isle of Wight Festival included, so that was good. Major works that sort of have finished is the quay works, sorry, the works to the quay up on the southern end has now completed, which is good. They are now looking at possible other works, and the harbours have been inspected as a report being made for those. We've been visited by the Marine Police and by David Foster from Marico and Border Force in the last 3 months, which have met up with staff to help with what's going on and training those things. One of our new members of harbour staff has sadly departed. He's gone to work at another marina on the mainland, so we've had to re-advertise for another member of staff, and we have got interviews set up for next month, so that should be good. The events we've had down there at the moment, Riverfest took place, and that seemed to work very well and well attended, and we had a little festival, Isle of Wight Festival was there as well this month. The navigation aids and inspections, we have a bit of problems with our leading lights, which are down by the hotel. One of them would have to be the one on the tallest pole, needed new fittings, and the shorter pole, some of the lights got damaged, so we've replaced all of them. Backboards and the design of lights have been replaced. All the channel markers have been inspected as well, and the ones that we brought a couple in to get them cleaned and painted, and some of their mooring attachments upgraded. That's sort of mainly it. Sort of Little London, which is next to Odessa Yard. We have cleared the boats from there to other locations in the harbour. So that's sort of been ready to be taken over by Odessa, as agreed. Other than that, we've been sort of reasonably occupied, but happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any questions? Darryl, I'll come to you, Matt, after, if I may. Thanks. Darryl.
Is this working? So 1.3a, the ladder, the most southerly ladder, which is obviously corroded and needs to be replaced. We got a time frame, and it says here that it's being fabricated.
The ladder's been replaced, being removed at the moment. They took that just before the Isle of Wight Festival, so I would imagine it really depends on materials and stuff. I haven't got a date, but last time they replaced it, it wasn't that long.
Laundry Lane and St Helens probably do it in about half a day. Darryl. Matt,
Thank you, Chairman. Two things. First of all, for Jonathan, is we've got the upcoming Armed Forces Day. I just wanted to clarify that definitely the toilets will be operational and open for that event. That's one of the primary events that the Community Council.
I haven't been contacted by the community whether they're being opened or they're not run by us. So I know it's happening on the 2nd. Last time.
We thought
No.
you opened the toilets.
Last time we only found out they were opening when their clean contract came down. We ended up closing them because they don't operate.
I think we probably need to clarify that between Newport Community Council and Isle of Wight Council, because they also weren't open during the festival, and that caused a number of issues. And it's down as an action for us to discuss it with you. So I think it kind of all fits into the same process, really.
who owns, sorry, Matt, who owns the toilets?
We own the toilets, but the toilets were closed. But I understand, but I understand the Newport Community Council wanted to take them on and use them when they had events in operation. But I think we maybe need to clarify for what events and.
I think I'm unaware that they would have been opened for the Isle of Wight Festival. If they were, I'm horrified at that, really. Riverfest, that's the kind of event that we wanted them for. So, the Community Council essentially put some money forward to do some work on the toilets so they could be used publicly because they were in a bit of a state of disrepair. So we need to sort of clarify that, I think, so we can make sure they're open for the Armed Forces Day. Sorry, Jonathan.
No, just back what Matthew said, really. Yeah, we paid for the refurb, didn't we? And our cleaners go in and clean them during and after they've been used for community events. So we just need to get the line of communication with our clerk and whoever. Was it with you, Jonathan, we need to speak to you about getting them open then? Or?
From the events that have happened, they were open for the Armed Forces Day. For Riverfest, they were opened, and we ended up shutting them the day later because they're still open. And I didn't see any staff planning.
Understand why you haven't
then
taken them on.
just to replace the old electric hand dryers gates, so you put sinks in.
You don't want to take them on, parish council, community council.
Sorry, all we could do is contribute towards the upkeep. But I think going forward, we'd definitely consider it. Julie?
I think it's because it's going to be part of the Harbour Master Plan as well, so it's not quite as simple as it was, and there's ASB down there as well for open all the time, so it kind of works for us if they're just open for events, really. That's kind of a sweet spot.
I think what I'm hearing, thanks, Matt, Julie. I think what I'm hearing is, apart from the odd occasion, really, it's not the harbour master's role and duty to take care of them. That's what I'm hearing.
They haven't been open to the public for numerous years. They did need some work to get them up to code because we had to change one of the hand dryer sinks that were no longer serviceable because of their age. But we never had it open before. Going back when they were open to public loos, there was a major problem with people sleeping in them, and the amount of smoke that came through the ceiling into our offices was quite spectacular with some of the parties they had down there.
Some portable ones like we've got in Ryde, they'll be fine, surely.
If I could say, Chairman, I think ultimately we wouldn't want them open permanently to the public. That would be, as Jonathan states, it would be disastrous. It's just when obviously the Newport Quay now hopefully is going to be having events back there. Riverfest was a real success, and obviously the Armed Forces Day coming back there is brilliant. I live in hope that the car show will come back there possibly in the next couple of years. You never know, Phil, you never know. Mr. Gallucci is very interested in Newport. But the toilet is the reason he isn't in Newport. which you might know that the lack of toilets on the quay is the reason that that show is not at Newport. So making sure that it's available for future
No,
events.
absolutely, I understand, and so I'm just trying to find the right place where we could get the facilities opened as you need them, that's all, and I'm not sure that it lies with us, that's all I'm really saying. I'm not sure that it does.
Yeah, I mean, the decision to close those toilets was made when obviously the decision was made to close all the public toilets, not by this committee, but obviously by those responsible. And obviously some of those toilets were taken over by town and parish councils, as we know. That one wasn't, because it wasn't really deemed to be a public toilet as such, and not very heavily used. From the harbour's point of view, Jonathan's got his own hospitality area for showers, and so it's not needed for harbour business. It's just needed, probably, as Councillor Price suggests, when there's any events down there. I suppose the issue is clearly the community council may want to support it if it's events that they're happy to support. It'll be just a question if you're not happy to support that particular event, or we're taking some money for that particular event, whether it's us that opens the toilets rather than yourselves. But that hasn't happened yet.
Might be simple to get a tenancy at will and have the keys and just open up when we need to. Just keep it simple, but we definitely don't want to take them over.
We're happy to help as much as we can. We just don't have enough staff to man them, to clean them weekend. Because if it's a busy event, then you've got
Kind of hearing, I think you're hearing the same, that if you want those toilets open, there wouldn't be an obstacle, but you've got to take care of it yourselves as a community council. That seems to be what I'm hearing.
yeah, they're padlocked all the time. The padlocks have been changed from the harbour ones to town parish. Luckily, they did give us one key, so I managed to lock it up the day afterwards. But
We'll take it outside this meeting, I think. Any further questions to Jonathan? Darryl?
I've just got one, probably on a slightly lighter mood than the toilets. How long did you laugh when the missing boat was found on its mooring?
I couldn't possibly comment, I believe is the line I've got to go with. We did find it rather unique, but it did mean that we had a good search around the whole of the Folly for blue boats, so kept us entertained.
Just I'm surprised about the festival staff, staying in a boat. I think that's pretty bad, isn't it? It's obviously not a suitable place to stay. And presumably were they staff associated with the festival itself, or were they staff associated with people who were, contractors, or not associated directly with Live Nation?
Those members of staff didn't last the festival at site. They got told.
Did we have any wider issues this year with the festival operation and our harbour state? And we've had in years gone by, and Matt's reported these had issues of varying matters.
This year, the festival ran swimmingly for us. There was a couple of problems with some passes and the times we got them, and clarification on some of the services that we were going to have. But it worked very well. There was a couple of things, sort of bins and access, but we've completed a festival. So, yeah, the main one was sadly losing.
Okay with this? Okay. The get well plan for Newport Harbour, Alex.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, Sean unfortunately is on leave today. Normally picks up on these, but I can probably cover them. Probably just for those people that are maybe haven't been to this committee before, the Get Well plan, by its title, was actually put together to try and make sure that we achieve the Port Marine Safety Code compliance for Newport Harbour. And we've been working on that for a number of years. We have actually achieved the Port Marine Safety Code compliance for Newport Harbour. So this is just ongoing work to make sure we maintain that. So I think to some extent, calling it the Get Well plan is probably past its day, because we've got well and we're improving now. So it is a little bit misleading. I think as far as the content goes, and myself and Jonathan are happy to take any comments on the content, but I think since the last committee, the two main items, the biggest is the achievement of the general directions for Newport Harbour, which is something we were lacking and have been lacking for quite some time, that give Jonathan powers to manage the harbour in a modern way. It's something that most modern harbours have got. Certainly Cowes Harbour, just up the water there, has had general directions now for quite some time. I'm very pleased to say that we are moving into the modern era. And also the other action was around risk assessments and making sure we include those at this meeting every quarter, which we will do. All of the other actions, which are relatively minor, that are shown in yellow, are for committees beyond today, because they're obviously further into the future. I think the most important thing to probably note from that is that we have achieved the Port Marine Safety Code compliance, and this is just ongoing work. So I think I'd probably like to suggest that we maybe change the title for Newport Harbour Get Well plan to something slightly different, or we include that as part of Jonathan's Harbour Master report. Happy to take any questions on that before I move on to Ventnor.
Any questions, Matt?
Yeah, not a question, just to sort of say well done to everyone for moving it to this point, because you know, when we go back to when this committee started and where we started, it was a completely different position to be in, and you know, fast forward to now, yeah, absolutely, the Get Well plan has been achieved, and it does need to be just a, you know, a compliance agenda item, really, doesn't it? Future compliance of some description. So I'll be very happy to see it change from a Get Well plan to something that you professionals determine is the right name. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. I guess another measure is we get less and less public, apart from the odd email about the performance of the harbour. We're getting less and less public concerns. It's probably another measure of how far you've actually gone with this committee, actually. So it's well done, all our staff. And absolutely agree. It seems it's only a small point for us, possibly for us, potentially for us, but should we carry on calling it a Get Well? If we really have got well, why don't we call it something else? Well, I've just open the suggestions. I'm sure our staff and officers are. Do you want to change the name first? Compliance. Sure, come on. Stay well scheme, yes. The spa and recuperation scheme.
I think what's important with this from a committee point of view is that we demonstrate to you, because this Port Marine Safety Code and the whole issue around procedures, etc., and running a modern harbour, it's obviously not something that's at one particular point in time. It's, as you understand, it's obviously continuous. But I think it's important that we continue to update you on what we're doing, and you hold us to account to make sure that we're doing that. So it really, I think, is more of a kind of an update, isn't it, or an update on the statutory harbour responsibilities.
Are we happy if we, in future, can we do this on the hoof, or is this another council thing that's got to have 3 days notice and 7 days public notice for us to do something that's not on the agenda? Or can we actually, as a committee, do something? Yeah, exactly. How do we feel about calling our Get Well plan the compliance plan?
Yeah, I don't have a real issue with what we call it. I think I'd probably ask the officers to sort of come up with the right terminology for that, but something that's continued harbour compliance or something. But I do I think certainly it should continue to be a agenda item every month. Sorry, every month. Go on, it's so long. Every committee meeting, because it's a permanent agenda item anyway, isn't it? So if we can keep both of those on there certainly while Ventnor's still, but obviously separate, but while Ventnor's still one of the harbour functions. Yeah, I think some kind, like I say, I think officers should probably call it the right name, but as long as it stays on the agenda as a permanent item, I'm happy with whatever you call it. Thank you.
That's very sensible. I'm happy that we asked our officers to come up with a suitable terminology that moves us away from the idea that we have actually improved and got well, and we need to, as you say, Matt, make sure it's on our items and that the officers are delivering what they need to under the statutory duties. But let's suggest that we are pretty good at what we do. So are you comfortable with that, Alex? We will ask you to come back and rename it. Oh, thanks for that. And then finally, if there's no more questions, and we'll be done, it's the we'll call it Get Well plan for last time for Ventnor.
Yeah, there was a lot more on Ventnor, and the reason for that is we're only just starting that journey, having completed what we've completed for Newport. The realisation that Ventnor Harbour is actually also a statutory port, surprisingly, means that we need to go through the similar process for Ventnor, be it all a slightly scaled down process because that's much smaller, but we need to start that process and go through all of that work for Ventnor. So what you've got there is a long list of all of the work that we need to do, and most of the dates are beyond today. Well, I thought they all are beyond today, some in June, but most of them are around about September time. But we're just about to embark on that process. So some of the things that we had for Newport, which have proved to be really quite useful, and a number of you have been on this group, things like forming the user group for Newport Harbour, we'll have to do all of that kind of work for Ventnor as well. Obviously, that will be running alongside anything we might do around Ventnor Harbour in discussions with partners, etc., etc. But whether somebody else runs that harbour or not, it's still our responsibilities as a statutory port, unless we take legal action to close it as a statutory port, and that is something we could consider, but it's not an easy process, and it's a very lengthy process. And we have taken some advice through our legal team about that. It hasn't happened very often in the country, but it is quite unusual to have a small marina that actually is a statutory port. But in terms of the Get Well plan, it needs to get well. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on it, but it is going to be somewhat scaled down. I'm happy to take any questions on that, but we said that we would include Ventnor. I mean, remembering this committee was originally set up to talk about just Newport Harbour, made the decision to extend that to Ventnor Harbour, and obviously the realisation that all this work needs to be done has come as a result of this process.
Comments and questions?
Just a comment, really, Chairman. I'm hoping and assuming that because we've gone down the journey with Newport, doing it again for Ventnor will be easier because you've already gone the route once. So although I note that it says separate policy to be drafted and kept separate and all the rest of it multiple times, there must be some carryover that you can achieve that cuts the process down and makes it a little bit easier for you.
I may, Chair, just going back to your point, Alex, about maybe looking at a legal route about Ventnor no longer being a statutory harbour. I don't think we should shy away from these decisions because they may be very long-winded. I mean, just look at the harbour revision order, that was deemed necessary, took a while, but we're in a better place, aren't we, as a council, and the harbour is in a better place because of it. So I just think definitely don't shy away from that. This is going to cost us arm and a leg and everything else, but I think sometimes you have to sort of bite the bullet on these issues.
Julie, absolutely support that, and absolutely the same words. We should definitely not, if the management of that harbour doesn't continue in the current fashion, we ought to not shy away from looking at disposing of the statutory duties for sure. Alex.
I think that's a very valid point made by both of you. I think the thing to clarify with that is, as a statutory port, we'd be unable to dispose of that to another organisation. We can only currently, we have to seek permission, look to somebody else to manage it. So if we're looking at disposal, then we would have to undertake the work through legal to do exactly as you suggested, is to consider closing it as a statutory port. Thank you.
Can I ask a question on that?
Thanks for that, Alex.
Process.
Any comments on that? That's quite an interesting comment. Julie.
Just a process comment, really. You know, what we'll be looking at a cabinet decision, or that we have to come to this committee first as a decision. Just quite interested because obviously.
Sorry, can I look into that and I can advise on that? And is that okay? I'll take that question away and circulate advice. Apologies. Thank you.
Matt, I'll come to you, JP.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I mean, in regards to that, I mean, it would possibly seem on the surface that does Ventnor need to be a statutory harbour? I don't know. I wouldn't have a clue. I would assume possibly it doesn't in this day and age. But if we're to even consider a decision like going through that process to remove that function, I think we should make sure that the right consultation is done with the local members and the parish council or town council and so on. That's the only thing I'd say.
JP.
It's sort of the question that Matt skipped over there. What benefit is there in maintaining it as a statutory port?
We're dancing on the head of a pin of the future of the harbour, but I'll let Alex speak to it.
Probably very little for a harbour of that size, because obviously the things like the Port Marine Safety Code tend to be designed for large-scale ports, not small harbours. So it does tie up in a lot of red tape that by my personal view is unnecessary and quite costly. If members would like, I mean, Joseph has suggested that we'll go away and look at what's involved with it. I think one of his predecessors did look at that before. We could bring back to the committee what it would mean and the work that's involved and the advantages and disadvantages to a future committee. I think that would be probably quite sensible.
Essentially a sort of cost benefit analysis.
There's another dimension to it, JP, which it's really difficult to go into detail about, but we are in talks with partners and stakeholders about the future of that harbour. Oh, sorry. Darryl, sorry.
Yeah, I'm not wishing to make the dancing on the pinhead any more difficult, but is it this? How long have we known of this situation that this is statutory? Because I wasn't aware previously. So is this something that's come up because we've looked into it, because we're looking into the future, or how did we end up in this situation that it was statutory, because it seemed so bizarre in the first place?
I can try and answer that, although I probably need to check to see whether it was correct. My understanding of it is that the harbour was funded through grant support, and it was some European grant right back in the very beginning, and it was one of the conditions of that particular grant that it became a statutory port. But it is, as I understand it from talking to our designated person, David, it's extremely unusual. And I think hence the reason why Helen Miles, when she was the head of legal services, did actually inquire about the process of closing it as a statutory. It's not closing it as a harbour, clearly it's just closing it as a statutory port. And at that stage, it was a very new piece of legislation, and Nobody in the country had done it. And I think we shied away from it at the time because we thought, crikey, that's going to be really costly. But it is something we maybe want to reconsider at some stage, I think.
The Ventnor Harbour originally was much bigger, wasn't it? And then it got redesigned, not thinking about the consequences of that redesign, basically, which then caused the issues with that we have to pay a lot of money each year with the weed sewer removal.
Any other comments? Difficult to expand on, and Sean's away, not that Alex and Jonathan are incapable of answering this, but Sean has been involved in talks with stakeholder partners about Ventnor, and I don't think there's much more we can say at this stage. I'd like to understand, maybe outside this meeting, Alex, what those discussions mean in terms of whether it would be preferential to all parties to release the statutory duty before other discussions took place. But you need to advise us on that. Thanks. Other comments? We've done tea and cake time, Chris. Thank you all so much. Thank you to staff, officers. What? Oh, members' questions. Sorry. Oh, so sorry, Matt.
The old Sawtooth building on Newport Quay, as we all know, is being used by a company running a roller skating rink and another facility downstairs for laser tag, basically. And it's obviously it's just had a bit of adverse effect, like it did last year, because of the fact it's inaccessible or been made inaccessible by the security of the festival, which I can sort of sympathise with the festival, but I think there definitely needs to be a bit more. I'm not saying it's necessarily the council's discussion, but somehow to help the discussion between the festival organiser and the firm that run that business. I've got something else to ask as well, but if Jonathan wants.
I spoke to people that are there. They were contacted by Solo, festival organisers. An agreement was made for when they were going to be able to operate up to, and their customers were allowed access to car parking and into site, and from a set period, there was an agreement that they would be doing maintenance and be operating, and some sort of agreement was made. I don't know the full details, but I went down there on Monday and he was still happy. So.
If I could just come back with regards to that facility. I mean, not only is it from the perspective of when me and Julie have been Newport Harbour councillors for long enough to remember the state that building was in, and it's fantastic to see it being used. But I just want to sort of recognise the community benefit that facility is giving to the local area. I mean, I know it's a commercial business, and I understand that it's a commercial business, and there may be a bit of sensitivity because of leases and so on. But I just want to sort of make it quite clear to this committee that I consider it a really, really important part of youth provision in Newport. I mean, I can't obviously class myself as a youth, but I've been roller skating, and it's a really, really well-used facility. I mean, all over the weekend, most of the evenings, there are events and things going on down there. And I just think it's had a really positive effect on particularly teenagers in the local area, because there is nothing else for them to do. So any possible way we can help to ensure that facility continues there is really, really important for the local community. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Julie.
If I could just assist on that, and yeah, I hear you and agree with you totally, Matt, on that one. It's a great facility. I know they've improved the building so much of their own costs. I think that's one of the reasons why we're looking at, from a regen perspective, looking at doing this end of the harbour first. You've been involved, and people around the table have been involved in discussions for the cultural building down at this end. of the harbour. I think we're looking at it from a different perspective now, because you've got, it's almost like a meanwhile use. It's a fantastic facility using a building that's already there, so we don't have to, in a way, that enliveningness. Sorry, something being made more vital. And evening nighttime economy as well. It's kind of like regenerating in itself. So you don't have to almost look, because that was going to be phase one down that end, but now we're flipped it completely by looking at it in a different light. And obviously with the council's renewed focus on cultural regeneration, and of course the long-standing issue of the which isn't it in the harbour at the moment, of the records office, which Jonathan's under Jonathan's remit. So yeah.
Thanks both. Jonathan, just finally on that, just as a personal comment, were you aware that the operators of the rink were comfortable with any arrangements they had with Solo?
Yeah, I went down sort of days before and the week before. I spoke to all of the resident businesses we have down there and made sure that they were okay for access. Passes were working. Yeah, when we got the passes, they were always a little close to the beginning of the festival, but everyone managed to get in and out. Worked a lot better this year. Last year was a little bit more interesting.
Different security this year, of course. Well,
thank you. I'm not sure if I missed. Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if I missed it in the report, but I'm just wondering about the are there any current vacancies in any of our commercial units on the harbour?
This is something that Sean usually deals with, but there are people using all the buildings that I'm aware of.
Comments, questions? That being so, the meeting, and we will look to officers to set up another meeting. 2 months, is it, Alex? So probably then begin of September rather than August. Yeah, I'm going to be in August, do it. Right. Like me.
Next meeting scheduled for 28th of September.
28th September. Members, thank you all for attending. Thanks for all your contributions, comments, and Chris is offering tea and cakes upstairs. Are you? Okay, there you go. That's an open offer, by the way. You're most welcome. Ethan. Thank you all.